バリバリ?
After 4 years of learning Japanese in an enjoyable way, I just found out that I passed the JLPT N1 test. And if you clicked on this video, you probably know what that is already, but just in case you don't, JLPT is the most known Japanese exam without a doubt, and N1 is the top level. So in this video, I want to talk about how I got to that point, and I want to talk about some mistakes that I made along the way, because I think you could get there faster. Also, if you're thinking, well, exams aren't everything, you're quite right, and the way I studied was actually more of a practical way. So here in Japan, I have no issues at all when I go to the doctor, if I go to the bank, the city hall, whether it's friendly conversation, whoever I'm talking to, I don't really have any issues. I feel like I can communicate with everybody pretty well. So first I want to tell you what I think was my biggest mistake. And this is in my case. I know for some people this is not a problem. So there are some people on YouTube or elsewhere on the internet that say when they study Japanese or any other language that they just dived right in with 100% native level content and they didn't worry about whether or not it was comprehensible. And that's what I did. At the beginning, I listened to 100% native level podcasts about politics, society, anything I was interested in, and I didn't really understand anything of what people were saying. I think there was definitely some practical use to that. I picked up on the sound of Japanese, the general feeling of Japanese, what it sounds like, how it flows, picked up some words along the way, but I think that if I had started with some easier podcasts or easier YouTube channels or programs from the beginning, I think I would have picked up a bit more. And the reason that personally I feel that way is because at the beginning, for about a year or so, I just watched whatever seemed interesting to me without thinking about whether or not I could understand it. And then later I started to think, maybe I should try something a little bit easier. And I started watching some children's TV shows or perhaps some kind of easier anime. For any of you starting, Shirokuma Cafe is really good. And I started listening to podcasts that were more aimed at people learning Japanese, not at native speakers. And I made a whole video where I introduced these, so go and check that out if you haven't seen it already. So like I said, some people felt like diving straight into whatever they wanted to watch or engage with or read was okay. But for me, I found that I learned a bit more effectively when I used more comprehensible input, which is what Steve Krashen was always talking about anyway.
We acquire language in one way and only one way, when we understand messages. We call this comprehensible input.
So this is a bit of a roadmap of how I studied and what I recommend that you should do if you're starting out. I think a lot of people start with this, but it's the Tae Kim Grammar Guide. Personally, I hate textbooks. You probably hate textbooks too. They're boring, they're filled with outdated expressions and unnatural phrases, but Tae Kim, he's like a guy that also hated textbooks, so he made this grammar guide for people studying Japanese. And what's really great about this is he summarizes just the really important core aspects of Japanese, and then he sort of encourages that you go and get natural input to build on that. And whenever he teaches something, he says this is kind of the correct way, and then this is the way that native speakers actually say it, so you don't go out and get a big shock when you start listening to real Japanese. The Tae Kim guide does require that you understand hiragana and katakana already, but if you search on the internet how to learn those, you'll find lots of websites teaching that. So in the beginning, while I was making my way through the Tae Kim guide, I was also using Remembering the Kanji, a very famous book for teaching kanji, and I kind of just blasted through the book, got a loose understanding, a kind of loose memory for kanji and how they worked. And then I just started trying to read simple manga or easier things to read, usually with furigana attached as well. Furigana is the hiragana, the phonetic alphabet written above the kanji to help you out. And then while doing that, while working through Tae Kim and working through Remembering the Kanji, at the end of the day, when I was kind of tired, I'd just watch anime or watch some Japanese dramas or YouTube channels or listen to podcasts or something like that. Also, something you've probably heard other people say, which I highly, highly recommend, is just trying to listen to Japanese as much as possible while you're busy doing other stuff. So if you're cooking, cleaning, walking, exercising, doing anything, just have your headphones in and listen to Japanese. Personally, I think that's one of the things that really helped me. I'm busy just like anyone else. I've got a wife, I've got a daughter, I've got a job, I've got things to do. So by listening while I'm busy, like while I'm shopping, while I'm cooking, while I'm doing all these household chores and things like that, that has added hours and hours to my day, which otherwise I wouldn't have been able to study. So definitely get hold of some good headphones and get that into your schedule. Then for watching things, I definitely recommend Netflix, because Amazon Prime, sometimes like these other streaming services, they don't always have the native language and the native language subtitles together. They might have a Japanese program with English subtitles or something like that. So if you use Netflix, they tend to have, I think they always have the subtitles for the native language as well. And now I live in Japan, so it's very easy for me to watch Japanese Netflix. But when I started studying Japanese, I was living in Spain and I just used a VPN. I used one that was called Soft Ether. It's made by Tokyo University, so it's reliable, it's safe. And that way, when I was living in Spain, I could use this VPN to trick my computer into thinking it was in Japan, and I could just watch Japanese Netflix with my ordinary Netflix subscription. So to summarize my first couple of years learning Japanese, right at the beginning I worked through Teikim, I worked through remembering the kanji, looked up some other grammar on other websites while I was going, and then I just got lots of input for a couple of years, reading things, watching things, listening to things, and I'll make more videos to recommend materials later, so don't forget to subscribe. Then after 2 years, I started outputting, so I decided to start taking one-to-one lessons online. I live in Japan, so I could go to a class, but I found online lessons are cheaper, easier, more convenient, and you can do it one-to-one. A lot of classes are going to be in a group, you're waiting for everyone else to speak, you're practicing speaking with non-native speakers a lot, whereas online you can take a one-to-one lesson. I used italki. I think there's other websites you can use, and you can talk to a teacher one-to-one. I have a really great teacher who gives a lot of good corrections. He's really fun to talk to, so I'll put a link for his profile down below. And when it comes to output, I do think it's good to wait for a little while. If you just start trying to take a lesson at the beginning, it's just going to be very awkward. You're not going to know how to say anything. Your teacher's going to have to correct everything you say, and it's just going to destroy your confidence. It's not very fun for the teacher either. It's not very fun for you. And it's just kind of to be honest, I think it's a waste of money and a waste of time. I think at the beginning, you should definitely get a good foundation before you can kind of have some kind of conversation, and then you can start practicing how to have a conversation with someone. Then what I did find after I started outputting is I noticed a lot of mistakes and a lot of things I didn't know. Like sometimes I knew very complicated phrases or grammar or vocabulary, and then I'd try to say something simple and be like, crap, I don't know how to say this very simple thing. So I do think at some point it's important to start outputting so you can start to realize where your weaknesses are. You can start to realize what things you need to work on. I usually take one conversation and lesson a week where I talk to my teacher for an hour. Sometimes we work on pronunciation. Sometimes we just talk together. And I live here in Japan, so I do get lots of opportunities to output now. I always go and talk to people even when I don't really need to. Like I ask people things even if I know the answer, just to get a conversation going, just so I can practice. So that's a luxury I have living here in Japan. But if you're not living in Japan, there are other ways you can find Japanese people online. There are things, for example, like VR chat. I think sometimes people use these random video chat things and stuff. So there's a few options. There's people doing this stuff on YouTube. You can have a look at that. So what I do now is, again, I'm always listening to Japanese when I'm cooking and cleaning and walking and shopping and exercising and doing all these kinds of things. I've always got Japanese podcasts going. When I relax in the evening, I usually read some manga. Sometimes I play video games in Japanese. Sometimes I watch things in Japanese. And then when I pick up some grammar or things I don't know, I just check them on the internet, see what that thing means, and then go back to the input, try to find more examples of that, see it in context, see how people use it naturally, and then try and get like a real deep understanding of how these things work. And as for passing the N1 exam, I wouldn't be completely honest if I said I didn't do any study. So of course, I was a little bit worried about whether or not I would be able to pass the exam. So about 2 months before the exam, so this is after 4 years of studying in a fun way and just getting lots of input and chatting with my teacher, for the 2 months leading up to the N1 exam, I started looking at past tests. And I think this was the best way to study. I got some past exam papers. I did the papers. And then if I got something wrong, I'd go to the internet and have a look what that grammar is. And basically studying for any of the JLPT tests is just mostly memorizing lists of grammar. And there's lots of great YouTube channels where they teach this stuff. Again, I'll make a video at some point introducing YouTube channels because there's a lot. I can't put them all in here. But there's plenty of videos where people are just working their way through N3 grammar, then N2 grammar, then N1 grammar. And if you just go through those playlists and just check that you know all these things, then I think that will really help in passing the exam. Two parts of the exam that you can't really fast track is the listening and the reading. You really have to have a good ability to just understand how Japanese works, especially for the reading part of the exam, because the questions are based on your comprehension. They ask you, like, what do you think the writer is trying to say? And they'll say which one is most correct. So you'll have 4 options and maybe 2 of them are kind of correct, but you have to choose the most correct one. So you really have to have a good level of comprehension. And you can only get that through lots and lots of input.
Need input.
Input. All right, you got it.
So yeah, just keep listening, keep reading, and you will be able to pass the exam. So just to recap, because that might have got a bit messy, the way I studied and the way I would recommend to other people to study is start with Take-In, start with remembering the kanji, get a basic idea of Japanese grammar, get a basic idea of kanji, and of course, before that you have to learn hiragana, katakana, and then just make your way through lots of input, and when you find something you don't know, have a look on the internet, see what it means, and then go back to input and look for more examples of how people use that.
More input, more input.
And then if you practice a bit of output too, then that's gonna help you to find your weaknesses. And of course, you'll get practice actually using Japanese. So I've probably repeated a lot of stuff that other people have said on the internet before, but perhaps I've helped to give it some validity. Perhaps now you feel like, oh yeah, input, it really works. I just need to have fun in Japanese and I'll get better, because that really is the case. That's what's worked for me. And if you do want to come and live in Japan, then speaking Japanese definitely makes it much easier and much more enjoyable and a much richer experience too. As I said earlier, I have put up a video where I recommended podcasts to listen to, and later I'm going to put up more videos recommending YouTube channels, TV shows, anime, books, manga, all different topics, but I gotta make a separate video for each of those because there's so many. So make sure to subscribe because I'm gonna introduce a lot of materials that you can learn with. Comment below if you have any questions or if you have any advice for people who are studying Japanese, and I'll see all of you back here next time.